This is Xiaomi's new phone called the Xiaomi 11T, which might trip up some people who expect the Mi branding we got in the past. And together with a new name comes some pretty high-level specs for a mid-ranger. You can pay more for a Pro version, which brings a higher tier chipset and even faster charging. But could this one actually be the better deal? I'm Will for GSM Arena, and let's find out in our Xiaomi 11T review. The Xiaomi 11T brings exactly the same looks as the Pro model, and they're pretty hard to tell apart. But on the inside, there are a handful of differences feature-wise. The design is pretty slick, featuring a two-step camera bump and a curved glass back panel that's really reflective. If you look closely, there's a subtle texture that looks like metal. The aluminum frame is also curved and is covered by a matte finish. And something you get here that many other mid-rangers don't provide is protection against water and dust. Both the Xiaomi 11T and 11T Pro have an IP53 rating. You do get most of the features of the Pro version here on the vanilla one. Let's start off with the display. It's a 6.67-inch AMOLED with a fast 120Hz refresh rate and Gorilla Glass Victus protection. Thanks to the high refresh rate, swiping and scrolling are quite smooth. And the screen is extra responsive thanks to a high 480Hz touch sampling rate. The screen's refresh rate doesn't dial down to save energy when you stop touching it, but it will adapt to certain apps like YouTube. This display is quite premium, especially for a mid-ranger. You get deep AMOLED blacks and support for 10-bit color. Colors are very accurate too, and there are plenty of options to tweak them in settings. As far as brightness goes, we were able to achieve 500 nits with the slider, and it boosts up to 800 nits in auto mode in bright sun. And there's HDR10+ support, though you don't get Dolby Vision here like you do on the Pro model. Another difference is that you don't get Harman Kardon branded audio, but the actual stereo speaker setup looks the same here. We measured good loudness, and the output is nice and balanced, with noticeable lows. One thing you are missing on these phones though is a traditional headphone jack. For biometrics, the Xiaomi 11T has a side-mounted fingerprint reader that doubles as the power button. As expected, it's fast and reliable. And for storage options, you get 128 or 256 GB, and it isn't expandable. The interface of the Xiaomi 11T is the latest MIUI 12.5 based on Android 11. At its core, it's the same interface we've seen from Xiaomi for the past while, with a familiar layout and features. But we should see an upgrade to MIUI 13 soon, and Xiaomi promises 3 major Android updates and 4 major security patches. The biggest difference between the Xiaomi 11T and the Pro version is the chipset. Here on the vanilla model, you get a high-end MediaTek Dimensity 1200, built on a 6nm process. It provides upper mid-range level performance, as well as 5G connectivity. It stands strong against phones running Qualcomm Snapdragon 700 series chips, but isn't quite up to the level of the 800 series you get in flagship-grade phones. And that's what you would get on the 11T Pro, a top-of-the-line Snapdragon 888. Still, even though the Xiaomi 11T doesn't top the benchmark charts, there's more than enough power here for smooth and dependable daily performance, as well as gaming. The Xiaomi 11T and 11T Pro have the same set of cameras, but a different chipset could result in different processing and performance here. There are 3 cameras on the back, a 108MP 9-in-1 main camera, an 8MP ultra-wide, and a 5MP tele-macro cam. 12MP shots from the main camera are great. They're rich in detail, and that detail seems to be more organic than what we saw in the Xiaomi 11T Pro, which tended to add excessive sharpening. There's plenty of contrast, colors look saturated but not over the top, and dynamic range is good too. Portraits taken with the main cam are good, with decent subject separation, although that can get tripped up by messy hair. Also, the lack of HDR means that more challenging scenes may become blown out. The ultra-wide cam's performance is actually great for this sort of camera. Its 8MP photos are sharp and detailed, noise is kept under control, and dynamic range is very good. The colors are a bit cooler than those from the main cam though. 5MP close-ups from the macro camera are pretty nice. You get the help of autofocus when shooting, and the photos have good detail and pleasant colors. If you're shooting in low-light conditions with the main cam, the phone will automatically apply some amount of night mode processing. These photos come out very good, with balanced exposure, good color saturation, well-preserved highlights, and developed shadows. There is some noticeable softness in darker areas though. You can toggle on a dedicated night mode for even heavier processing. This brightens up shadows and reveals detail in the darker areas. Highlights don't look any different, and there is some extra sharpening added. There is also the option to disable night mode entirely. In this case, you get more clipped highlights, though the development of shadows isn't too different. In certain scenarios, there is a small advantage in sharpness by shooting this way. The ultra-wide doesn't get an auto night mode, and by default, its low-light photos come out with dark shadows, blown-out highlights, and dull-looking colors. Turning on the dedicated night mode brings a dramatic improvement in both highlights and shadows, as well as better color saturation. Selfies from the 16-megapixel front-facing cam aren't too great. The shadows look dark, and exposures could be brighter, and detail leaves more to be desired for this resolution. On to video recording, which can be done with the main cam and up to 4K resolution at 30 FPS. This footage is excellent. There is a lot of detail with natural rendition, colors are lively, and dynamic range is flagship grade. The ultra-wide camera shoots in 1080p. The detail is alright for this resolution, and dynamic range is good. The colors and contrast are a little washed out looking though. There is electronic stabilization available even in 4K on the main cam. It does an excellent job at ironing out handheld shake and pans, and walking is decently smooth. Alright, moving on. Another thing we wanted to test was the difference in battery life, which can also be affected by the chipset. Both the Xiaomi 11T and 11T Pro have a 5000 mAh battery capacity, but battery life is slightly better on this model, with an endurance score of 98 hours in our proprietary tests. Still, it's not night and day. The charging speed though is a different story altogether. The Xiaomi 11T supports 67-watt fast charging, and the adapter comes in the box. It's super fast, able to charge the phone from 0 to 86% in half an hour. But that's still much slower than the 120-watt charging you get with the Pro model. So that's the Xiaomi 11T. It's a flagship killer through and through, with a powerful chipset, a 120Hz AMOLED, stereo speakers, competitive cameras, and fast charging. You even get water resistance. In fact, the 11T might be doing its job too well, threatening its own sibling, the Xiaomi 11T Pro. The Pro is considerably more expensive, and although its charging is faster, the higher tier chipset doesn't seem to bring with it other improvements feature-wise. At the end of the day, the Xiaomi 11T is a great value-packed mid-ranger that can compete with much more expensive devices, and is definitely worth recommending. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.